lot of places you see huskies, you see proper breed dogs out on the street. The ear tags that you see on dogs, when you adopt a puppy, a lot can go wrong. You cannot risk with rabies because it's a fatal disease. Our primary goal is to get dogs adopted here. Then we open it up for being eligible for adoption abroad. For $5 you can support the full vaccination of a dog. She is adopted, but she's adopted by a student who always goes home every summer for a month to his home country. So Gigi is with us during that time. So it was completely empty when we got this plot 15 years ago, almost 2009.
Oh, even like there's horses running in there.
But now there are more and more buildings, and at that time around the lake it wasn't the concrete path and all of this around. It wasn't so built out. There has never been, or not been for a very long time, sterilization and neutering programs. When people adopted a puppy, they usually just let the puppy down, play on the playground. It grew up essentially there. Then it was never neutered. Then there were other puppies. So it's separate. It's many different ways. One is that what you can see now, a lot of places you see huskies, you see proper breed dogs out on the street. That's because people adopted them as puppies and they were not prepared of the work that it requires, and then they just let them out on the street. Breeding is not regulated here. So because they don't regulate breeding, it's very cheap to get these so-called breed dogs. They are not really properly bred, so by general breed standards they wouldn't even be categorized as breed dogs, most of these dogs in other countries. But because here it's essentially, if my neighbor has a Labrador and I have a kind of Labrador, then let's have a Labrador puppy. So it's not really regulated. Backyard breeding is very, very popular, so these breed dogs are very cheap. So people will say that, okay, I'm going to get a husky for, I don't know, $200 or less. And then they get this puppy to each other. It's more like a status symbol, so they get these puppies that I'm going to get this amazing breed for my niece or whoever, and then nobody is prepared to take care of that animal because they don't know the breed's needs. Like a husky cannot be closed into an apartment. They are working dogs. Most of these dogs are working dogs that they need to work, need to do the job that they were bred for, or the hunting dogs as well, exactly. And then when they don't get this, then they become agitated, then they start acting out, and that's when they end up on the street. So it's very, very often that's the case. And then they start breeding, and then it just never ends.
Is there any legislation that requires neutering?
Municipalities, they have their regulations, some of them, like in Tbilisi as well. Technically, if you have a dog which is not for breeding, not a purebred dog, then you should neuter it. The problem here is not at the level of regulations, it's more at the level of law enforcement. It practically doesn't exist. So law enforcement in Georgia is in a very, very, early stages.
Basics, yeah.
Regulations are there, they are just not being kept. So I always say that I don't want to push for more regulations, because first we have to figure out a way of how to enforce those regulations. Most of the bigger municipalities, they have shelters. However, they are really overrun and they are not really well managed. The Tbilisi municipality shelter, they always try to have new management, and some of them are better, some of them are worse. But of course it's a municipality shelter, so you cannot expect that dogs will be having, their regular walks there with volunteers and all these things. They do provide free neutering and vaccination, rabies vaccination. The ear tags that you see on dogs, there are several organizations. We are doing that as well, that we neuter, vaccinate and ear tag and release dogs. There is another organization, other private organization, Mayhew, that does that also, and then the municipality does it in large scale. So the municipality really neuters approximately 5,000 dogs a year, or that was the latest number that I had from them. So they do that. However, they only vaccinate for rabies. They don't vaccinate against other canine diseases. There is a very big gap where services are not being offered.
Dogs in the street, you said that they are, if you see the ear tag, they're generally vaccinated. That means that they're safe. to be touched or petted?
Yes, generally dogs are safe here. However, there are always, every year, there are some rabies cases. And I say that if you have a dog that, even if it's ear tagged, and if you get bit by a dog, go and get the rabies shots. I always say that because this is, and this we say in our educational programs as well, that you cannot risk with rabies because it's fatal disease. If you catch it, you're not going to survive.
There's no cure. Yeah,
exactly. So I always say it's not complicated. It's very cheap at the Tashkent immunization center, which is the best because they charge local prices, so you're not going to be overpriced or something. And they are quite knowledgeable as in saying they check the wound. They say that okay, this is a minor scratch. There is no blood drawn, so you're not gonna need the vaccine. They are quite clear about it. I would recommend that you go to the Tashkent Immunization Center, and they will tell you that whether you need the vaccine or not. If the dog can be monitored, if you get bitten by a dog here, then you contact the municipality as well. They take the dog and they monitor it for 10 days. And then they release it if it doesn't show any signs of rabies. Then they will release it. And that also means that you can stop, because it's not one rabies shot that you get, but it's like a full program, a full schedule. But if the dog doesn't show any signs of rabies after 9 days, you can stop the vaccination. Start it, and then you see the next steps, what the municipality says as well. But start it, because if you don't get vaccinated within the 24 hours, if you are bit by a rabid dog, you're gonna get the disease and you're not gonna survive. So this is a very short time frame. So the Tashkent Immunization Center is open 24/7. And you just start it, that's the main, and then the next day you can figure out the other things. You can figure out that maybe someone can monitor the dog. You can contact the monitoring agency and you see actually when was the last time the dog was vaccinated. But start it. I always say that go there, start it, and then the next day you can safely go after, by the tag number when the dog was vaccinated, and figure out the rest of it. But you're not going to lose anything with starting it. It's 20 lorry, so it's not...
Right, yeah. Patting the dog doesn't give you the rabies?
You need bite, you need saliva, so fluid contact you need. Other than these very few zoonotic diseases like rabies, because we are two different species, you are more likely to catch any disease when you get on the marshrutka where there are other human beings with actual human diseases than from a dog which has only canine diseases. So like distemper, parvo, these are all canine diseases. You cannot catch it because it's a different species.
That's pretty safe.
Yes, safer than traveling on a marshrutka, I always say. Because there you have, every sort of thing between humans that can go around.
Oh my god, I'm not going to take marshrutka anymore. Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about like the shelter and how you ended up working here?
The organization was founded in 2009 by a Dutch guy who was here, purchased this land and then opened the premises 2010-11. And I arrived that time in the country, so I was here from the very beginning as a volunteer.
Where are you originally from?
I'm from Hungary. So since 2009-10 permanently, and before that as well I spent here quite a few months per year. So since 2006 until 2016, I was volunteering, and then 2016 the then director Fiona has left, and then I have taken over the management together with a friend of mine. And then when my friend left, then it was only me from the last 3 years. I always say when somebody comes here that what you see here, visibly the shelter, but everyone recognizes us from that there is a shelter. And even when they call as well Ali Dog Shelter, and I always say, they correct them, that it's Dog Organization Georgia, because essentially the shelter, although is the most visible part, but the least, the smallest in a sense of the least effective part. Because we do the educational programs, which I already mentioned, which I think is of major importance. We also do what I call small grants program or community outreach programs, where we provide these services, especially what I was saying that is not really there, to caretakers of street dogs. We have so many incredibly dedicated people in Tbilisi that care for street dogs. None of this would happen if there were not these volunteers, these caretakers, that in their area, they live, I don't know, in Danifors micro district, and then they take care of the dogs there. However, what they don't have, they can ask the municipality to sterilize these dogs, but what they don't have, that if a dog gets hit by a car, if a dog gets sick, if a dog bites someone, so if there are any other issues that arise with the dog, they are left without any help. So what we try to do with our grants program is that we provide for them preventative care, vaccination, so not just the one rabies vaccination that they get from the municipality, but to have complex vaccination so that the dogs will be protected, because parvo and distemper are massive issues here. So we give them vaccination, we provide them also anti-flea and anti-parasite medication, worm medication, so anything that can prevent other diseases to come on the dogs, so that they would be, because tick-borne diseases, Lyme, Ehrlichia, mosquito-borne diseases, Leishmania is a massive issue here. So we try to prevent these by providing these anti-parasite medication for the carriers that then they can give to the dogs. And also we have this small grants program that if a dog gets hit by a car, needs a surgery, then they contact us that we need to have this surgery, we can provide a recovery place for the dog, etc. We organize everything, but we don't have the funds for the surgery. In Georgia, because salaries are so low, none of these people that anyway put all this effort into the dogs voluntarily can be expected to pay several hundreds of lari's for a surgery like an amputation, leg amputation, or a broken bone, and fitting and fixing that. So then we provide that. So we try to provide these in-between services that make sure that these street dogs, once they are vaccinated and neutered, they can live safely and to have some quality of life out in the street.
And then if I live like in the area where there are stray dogs, how can I become this kind of person?
You can register at the municipality as well as a carer. So you can register. It's like an in-between status. You're not the owner of the dog, but if something happens with the dog, then they would contact you. So there is this system here. You can register it with the municipality, or you can just contact us. Like now, we have a girl in Eliava market who takes care of 150 dogs.
100.
And yes, so we are aware of her. We know, and then now we got in a corporate partner. They are going to donate some money to care for these dogs. So they reach out to us as well, that they need help or what they need.
When caring for a dog, I provide some food. I make sure that they have water right now and they
Yes,
eat.
Exactly.
But that's about it. Is there anything else that I, as a citizen,
I
can
always say that worm medication and anti-parasite, so flea and tick medication, especially during the summer month, is incredibly important because most of the diseases that we see in adult dogs here are tick-borne diseases, and they can be fatal. So if you can prevent that, so you can cover for the dogs that are in your area for this 3-4 months when really these parasites are around, so ticks and sandflies are around, and we provide that as well. So we can give Frontline, which is a spot-on, or NexGuard, which is a chewable tablet, so that you can cover the street dogs in your area. And many times carriers reach out to us that they need, X amount. Of course, it's limited how much we can provide, but we try to give some to everyone so that they can protect the dogs. I'd say that's the most important thing. Even sometimes even more than food, because food they somehow find it.
Yeah.
But if they get any of these diseases, their survival chances are very, very low. Then everything that destroys their immune system, and then everything goes down with it. So preventing these diseases, and it's very simple because you just make sure that they have these drops.
And it's a drop, or is it how does it work?
You can have color, you can have drop, you can have tablets. We usually provide tablet or drops.
It's nice that there are people who come and volunteer. I was amazed with the history and how it all started out of sheer.
It's mostly volunteer based.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have employees. So we have currently we have 6 employees because you have to have someone 24/7 here with the dogs. So you can never leave them alone.
Parks inside. you. I always try to keep everything clean. Now, come on. And when they are just asking me, how can we help you, or like that, I was like, we haven't do anything at this moment because I do everything.
You did
so,
everything.
Yeah. So if you want help us, just brush them, take them outside for a walk, play with them, just interact things. This is a place where you can rest, where you can have a nice time.
So we always have employees, but the majority of the work is volunteer based. It's people that are coming here. They walk dogs, they exercise dogs, they socialize them. They come to our events and they help on our events. So we would not be able to do it like this without volunteers, because the idea from the beginning was that it should not be like a big shelter where you have dogs just in kennels all day long. But that it should be something where dogs are more socialized, they have more interaction with people. So that's been the idea from the beginning. But you cannot do that without volunteers. So it's really important
That's
to have
great.
them.
Yeah. And how do you find volunteers, or how they
They
find?
find us.
They
They
find.
find us usually online. So it's many people that when people arrive to Georgia, they immediately see the dog situation, the stray dog situation here.
And they start searching.
And they start searching and there are very few organizations work on this, and even from those very few organizations, only there are three shelters in Tbilisi, other than the municipality shelters, and we are the only ones that we are open to schools. We are open because we set it up in a way that anyone can come and visit, because we keep puppies in different areas. We have an isolation place for new arrivals, which ensures that all the dogs that are actually in the shelter area, they are ready to be meeting
Safe,
with people
kind of,
and safe. Yes, exactly. So like this, we can always have school groups. We have many school groups, and then they bring their parents during summer holidays. So we have weekly school groups. We have school groups that just comes once or twice a year. We have school groups that come once a month. We have children not just from public or international schools, but we also have special schools that, for example, children with Down syndrome. So it's good for the dogs because they get socialized. It's good for the children because they get socialized with dogs.
Well, yeah.
So it's good for everyone.
And when the kids, like the school kids, when they come here, like, do they get to walk dogs as well and
Yes.
take care of them?
Yes.
That's all of that. That's nice.
Yes. So what we usually do is that they have a short introduction to how to stay safe around dogs, because we also go to schools to teach this. So we go to schools to teach how to be safe around dogs, generally about the street dog situation, how they can help or get involved. And when they come to the shelter as well, often they start with this, especially the regulars, that they have a small introduction of how to keep safe, what to watch out for a dog, and then they take them out for a walk, or some of them stay in and brush the dogs, depending on what they want to do. We had many times school children. We had one particular, I'll never forget Camilla. She was coming from the British International School. She was terrified of dogs, but in a way that she was actually crying when she first arrived, that she would not come in. And by the end of that half year, she was out walking the biggest dogs, and then I remember the dog pulled her and she fell, and she just jumped up and just started just continuing the walk. So she was so happy, and she was coming always at summers as well until they moved. So she was one of these, because with her as well what we did is that we have a special pen where there are just few dogs in. So if a child is particularly scared of it, then we start a slow introduction. Then we have very calm dog together in a closed space, so that they know that nothing sudden can happen, and the children are relaxed, and then they gradually get to this point where they are where they are less scared of them. So we have many of these programs and experience with them.
You said that you're trying to find homes for the dogs here in Georgia. How is the situation with that?
Very, very rare. Dogs over 1 year of age, nobody almost ever adopts them in Georgia. Puppies, you can find some homes for in Georgia, but even that is tricky because you need to check the place where they go to. So this is why we go to schools as well to teach responsible pet ownership, because it's often that very few people realize how much work is to adopt a puppy here. And most of the puppies that come back, they come back that they were adopted like at age 2-3 months, and then when once they start changing teeth, once they go through this chewing period, the period when they are, they listen less, they are just being puppies, and that's not really in the general mindset that how much work that is. Once they turn 1 year old, it is much easier, but unfortunately people here don't really understand that adopting an older dog makes your work much easier because they are over all the puppy craziness.
Teenage
Yes,
craziness.
exactly, and you already can see their character, so it's much safer, I think, to adopt a dog over 1 year of age, because when you adopt a puppy, lot can go wrong, and lot goes wrong when they are not trained properly or when they are not raised properly, and then when we are ending up with issues with dogs that have been, they turned aggressive because they didn't have enough stimuli, they didn't have proper way of being raised, then it's a problem. Jacko, who was he's actually being called Grumpy now. He was very old, and Maite, the Spanish girl who was here, was so attached to him that he kept saying, no, we cannot give him to them. We cannot give him to them. They shouldn't adopt the dog because she was worried about letting the dog go. And then he went to this home and just became the nicest dog. So it's very nice to adopt senior dogs. Yes. So we had many that. Yes, that waited for a long time and then eventually got adopted. They usually ask, we have approximately 44, now it's exactly now it's less because
The
we
number
had
of
two.
dogs. Let me see.
Now this moment is 42. Because
40
two left and one came.
One came, yes. And then I have one at home as well, and then we have all the puppies, so many puppies in foster homes.
What is foster homes?
So when you foster, we have a cooperation with trainers. So you get free training advice. I always say that you're gonna get everything. The food is provided, toys, balls, everything is boys, not but balls. So toys, balls, everything is blankets, pillows, boxes, whatever is
Wow.
needed is be provided. We have a really comprehensive description of how fostering works. So if you want to foster, you also apply to us. I send you this document of how it works, and then if everything is clear and fine, then you can take any of the dogs, but mostly the puppies that we need fostering for. It's always based on the length of the fostering is always based on what the foster parent wants. So if you say that you have 3 weeks that you can foster them, then at the end of the 3 weeks the dogs will be picked up. Some of them say that we can foster the dog until they get adopted. It's very rare though, because it can take years. So most of the people, they say that okay, we have a finite period of when we can foster, and then we adjust to that.
Oh, that's nice.
And then everything is provided. Many times the foster carers say that, don't bring me the food, use that for the shelter dogs. But many foster carers, they just contact us that 2 days before the food runs out, that please can you bring us the next batch of food. So it's flexible, but the general idea is that we provide everything for a foster carer. We try to line up another foster, like now we had several dogs that one foster finished, and then I always manage to find another foster carer, because once we don't, then they have to come into the shelter, and we don't have the place for that. So,
Right.
so I'm always, now I know that there are many foster carers that their period is over next week, so I'm already, trying to think of the next option of where they can be
Right,
taken. We have a lovely puppy called Snow, and she should go very soon. Next week, 26, I have to pick her up. So, if we have a foster, then she goes to a foster, and if we don't, then she comes in here.
And it's puppies because they need to be socialized and
Mostly puppies because they need to be vaccinated fully, but we have, all of them can be fostered. I also like if dogs a couple of months, I think, before he flew to his new home. Because it's nice for them, it's a better transitioning period if they don't go straight from the shelter to the new home in another country, but they have like this adjustment period where they are still here, but they get used to, in a foster home, how is it to live in a home environment. And it worked out perfectly. So we see that most of the dogs that have this transition period given, they are much happier in the new environment.
adjusting.
So
I've read that some of the dogs they get to get families abroad as well.
yes.
That's something that you frequently as well do. How does that work? How can a person from abroad adopt a dog from Georgia?
So I always say that our primary goal is to get dogs adopted here, because I believe that where the problem is created, that's where it should be solved. But it is never happening really at the scale that it would be needed, which means that after a couple of months, if a dog doesn't find home here, then we open it up for being eligible for adoption abroad. And usually we work together with partners, whether they are people that tell us that okay, we can foster dogs in certain countries. We have this in the Netherlands, we have this in Poland, because we never like to send dogs. It did happen before that we sent dogs that were just adopted abroad, and we did video calls, and then they reach out to us. They fill in an application form. Then we organize a talk with them, or a meeting, an online meeting with them, where we discuss which dogs are potentially the best for them, and then out of those they can do video calls. So we had there was somebody who wanted to see how a dog behaves in a park, so we organized a Zoom call with the dog in the park so that they can see how the dog behaves in a park. However, we always want to make sure that we have a backup plan. So we only send to places where we have partners, whether private or whether organizations
back up
as
in
partners.
case.
Yes, that if anything goes wrong, because it would be very irresponsible to send them, and if it doesn't work out, if the family has any emergency and then there is no other plan, then it just we don't want that. So we only do this where we have partners that can make sure that okay, if something goes wrong, then we are there. So often these are organizations that we partner with, and many times these are individuals that say that okay, we cannot adopt from you, but we are here and happy to be a foster or a backup plan if something goes wrong, and then we know that we can send the dog into that country, knowing that there will be someone checking on the family, there will be someone checking on the dogs. So that's usually the way we do it. So I always say that we don't have a separate budget for this, so we don't finance this from our general budget, because it would be very, people that donate, the organization is completely run on private donations. So if people donate, they want to see these dogs being helped here in Georgia. And for many of them, it would not be acceptable that we spend this money on airline tickets or
Right.
tickets for the
And
dogs
they're
to travel.
very expensive.
They'd rather see this being spent on veterinary care, feeding of these dogs, and just their general care. So usually the agreement is that the adoptive parents will cover the fee or the flight of the dog. It's not very expensive. I mean, for to the EU, I would say it's we have the tickets are approximately 200 euros for the dog, and then the paperwork is another 150 euros maximum. We don't ask adoption fees,
Right.
and these dogs they all arrive fully neutered and fully vaccinated, neutered with several tests being done, which themselves cost a lot in the EU. So if you want to adopt a dog in the EU and want to neuter them there, the cost of that is going to be much higher than flying a dog in from Georgia.
Oh, okay.
So, and these dogs are already neutered, already coming with the paperwork, already fully vaccinated.
I see the motivation why people from my question
Yeah.
was like why people from abroad would be adopting a dog when they could have adopted locally.
For many cases, it is because they were in Georgia, they saw the situation here, and then when they went back and they've become ready to adopt, they remember that we want to have these dogs. So most of the cases, I would say, is because of this, because they visited the country, they have seen the street dogs here, and then they couldn't take, obviously, because when you go for a 2 weeks vacation, it's not like that you're going to go home with a dog, but then they went back and they decided that they want to have, and then they reach out. Some cases it's organizations that we work with. In their cases, organizations in the EU, they always have an adoption fee set. So many times these organizations tell us that, okay, the adoption fee that they get, they reimburse the flight ticket to us from the adoption fee, because that's approximately the same. So usually the adoption fees in EU countries is a couple of €100. Same in the USA as well.
That's the shelter that is charging it.
Yes, the organization there that is charging it. So this adoption fee then they transfer to us. Usually that's the situation with organizations, but it always depends on agreement. So we just try to make sure that there is a backup plan, and that we don't spend our general budget on that, so that people, when they donate, they always know that it goes directly for the dogs, for feeding, for their vet care, for their other general care, and not on flight tickets.
Dogs, when they fly to their home, I think I've seen in the group, one of the posts was like, you're also looking for volunteers who can take the dog.
Flight volunteers,
Right.
yeah. When you fly a dog, you need to have you need to add it to someone's. You can fly it as cargo, but that's extremely expensive and requires lots of paperwork, additional paperwork for authorization for the person to pick it up here, to take it to the airport, to collect it there. There's lots of extra work and extra money, and it costs at least 5 times more than adding just as an excess luggage. So when somebody flies to Amsterdam, for example, they contact us, they can fill in a form on our website that we're flying to Amsterdam, and then we get back to them that we register them, and then if we have a dog that found a home in Amsterdam or nearby where they can pick them up from Amsterdam, then we reach out to the flight volunteers, and then we manage the flights like that.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
And in that case, we take the dogs to the ministry for the paperwork, we take them to the airport, we stay there during the check-in, and the dogs are collected on the other side by the families. So we always make sure that the volunteer has the minimum work possible with this. They are not together with the dog during the flight, so it's really just that check-in time when but we are there. So
right.
yes.
And like if I fly somewhere, right? Say, is there like a list of dogs that need, like, where can I find this information?
So usually people write to us. We always post it on Facebook as well, and we have a section on our website that being a flight volunteer. So if you fly anywhere, you just fill in that form, and then we get back to you if that's a match for any of the dogs
perfect.
that are. Yes, so on our website you can find this flight volunteer form and fill it in there.
You mentioned donations, and like that the entire shelter organization is running on the donations.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about donations and how people can participate?
You can find all the donation options on our website, which is dog.org.ge, and there you can donate via PayPal, TransferWise, directly to our bank account. Leashes we always need, collars we always need. These are things that go very, very fast.
Toys as well, right? Something I read on the website.
Yeah. You see that bag there up there?
Yeah.
That is the bag for traveling. So
Okay,
anything like
anything-
this, which is for boxes and screws and these things, I put into that bag, which is for traveling. And we have also this option where you can become a guardian of a dog from distance. So that means that you become a guardian, for example, Gigi or any of the other dogs, with a monthly donation. This can be anywhere from a small amount of 5 USD up to 75 USD, depending on how much you'd like to, support the dog with. And then you receive updates on your dog, so you're gonna have like a special access to website surface where you will be seeing updates on your dog, on the dog that you adopted from distance or you become the guardian of. We regularly have fundraising campaigns as well on different crowdsourcing platforms, but all of this is on our website. So when you go to our website and you find the donate button, then you can see all the options of how you can support, and every little support means a lot. So when you donate, that's the good thing about Georgia. The bad thing is that the situation is really, really difficult for street dogs here. But the good thing that even for 5 USD, you can support the full vaccination of a dog. Just to be prevented to catch diseases. So it goes a very, very long way. So 5-10 USD goes a very long way here in helping them to be, prevented from getting diseases or cured. So that's the biggest help that anyone can do.
Yeah. And I can add it to my video as well.
Yes,
and
the
the links
links,
below,
yes,
so that
yes.
anyone who watches it and resonates with this, I will for sure ask them to support.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
No,
It was
thank you.
fun. It was very
Yeah.
interesting to talk to you about that as well.
No, thank you so much.